Juan Pablo Montoya's remark wasn't the usual paddock noise, it landed like a hammer, and if you felt that shock, you weren't alone. He didn't just criticize laps or point fingers at a driver. He traced a pattern that makes everything else start to make sense. Hamilton isn't the problem, the structure around him is. Think about that for a second. A former driver, someone who's lived and breathed this sport, standing up and saying what a lot of people had been whispering in private. Ferrari have built a magnificent car in flashes, but they haven't built the environment that lets a champion turn those flashes into consistent dominance. That's the headline, and it's personal. Lewis arrived with all the credentials, the work ethic, and the hunger, and what he's met with instead is mixed messages from the top. A car that behaves like a question mark instead of a tool, and an internal mood that mistakes feedback for attack. Montoya tore through the usual noise to point out something. Painfully simple, Hamilton is doing the work. He's sending notes, digging into telemetry, staying late on data, and trying to hand Ferrari the blueprint for what worked around him at Mercedes. The pushback hasn't always been constructive. That's not a narrative about an aging superstar, it's a culture problem. When a team tells its drivers to speak less, that sounds decisive from a press standpoint, but from inside the garage it dials down the one thing champions rely on: open, fast communication. You can picture the scenes. A driver trying to explain a subtle mid-corner behavior while the factory debates tone and optics, and that tiny timing mismatch costs tenths, then whole races. So this chapter is about that moment Montoya created, shock followed by clarity. He didn't aim to embarrass Ferrari, he aimed to force them to choose what kind of team they want to be. And that choice matters not just for Lewis' pride, but for lap times, development direction, and weather. The SF25's flashes of speed become a consistent weapon or remain a temperamental flower. I want to hear from you. Do you think Montoya hit the nail on the head? Vote in the comments, yes or no, and drop a one-line reason. If you like this kind of inside analysis and want more, please subscribe and help us reach 2,000 subscribers. It really helps the channel bring deeper breakdowns like this one. Also hit the like button if you want a follow-up piece that goes deeper into who inside Ferrari. Push which decisions? Alright, next, we're going to pull back the curtain on the leadership clash that's been quietly shaping every decision at Maranello and explain exactly why Elkan's speak less moment matters more than a soundbite. If you're ready to dig into those power lines, stick with me. I'll take you through it next. The deeper you look into this situation, the clearer it becomes that Ferrari's struggles aren't centered in the cockpit, they're rooted above it, in a leadership structure that keeps pulling into different directions. This is where the tension between President John Elkann and team principal Fred Vasseur becomes impossible to ignore. On one side, you have Elkann pushing urgency, demanding sharp responses, immediate turnarounds, and tighter public messaging. On the other side, Vasseur has always believed that stability and long-term adjustment are the real weapons for climbing out of a performance hole. When these philosophies clash, the effect doesn't stay. In the boardroom, it filters through engineering groups, strategy departments, and finally into the ears of the drivers, who are trying to deliver results while reading signals that contradict each other. And that contradiction is exactly what Montoya was pointing at. The moment Elkann told the drivers to speak less, it wasn't just a tone problem or a bad soundbite. It revealed how misaligned the leadership pillars had become. To the outside world it sounded strong, maybe even decisive, but inside the team it created silence at the wrong time. Engineers began second-guessing what they should say. Strategists tightened communication to avoid being seen as critical. And Hamilton, who built his championship legacy on transparency and detail, suddenly found himself an atmosphere that punished the very habit that made him great. You can imagine how quickly that kind of message ricochets through a team. A driver is supposed to be the final link in the chain, the one who translates data into instinct, but if the environment around him becomes defensive, every piece of feedback starts feeling like a risk rather than a contribution. And Montoya recognized that instantly because he's seen this movie before. Teams under pressure start protecting hierarchy instead of protecting performance. Instead of asking what the driver meant, they ask why he said it. Instead of leaning in, they pull back. And that's how you lose development clarity. That's how confusion on philosophy turns into confusion in the garage, and eventually into a car that behaves like it's built by committee rather than conviction. Lewis has worked in high-pressure systems his whole life, but the difference at Mercedes was that everyone around him was reading from the same page. When he pushed, they pushed. When he questioned something, they treated it as a direction, not a disruption. At Ferrari right now, that chain of alignment doesn't exist, and you can feel the consequences every time the SF25 swings between brilliance and chaos in the same weekend. What stands out most is that this leadership divide isn't loud or dramatic, it's subtle. It's the kind of internal friction that doesn't show up on TV, but changes everything behind the scenes. And it forces drivers into a strange position where they're trying to lead without knowing how much freedom they actually have. Before I move on to the technical side of the story, I want to hear from you directly. If you had to choose which philosophy Ferrari should commit to for the rest of the season, would you pick urgency or stability? Leave your answer in the comments and tell me why in one sentence. And if you're enjoying this deep dive, make sure you subscribe to help us reach our goal of 2,000 subscribers. It really helps us bring you more in-depth F1 breakdowns like this. Next, we're going to look at the car itself, because the SF25 isn't just inconsistent by accident. Its behavior is part of the story and understanding. That is the key to understanding Hamilton's struggle this season. The more you break down the SF25, the more obvious it becomes that this car is at the center of the entire crisis, because what Hamilton and Charles are wrestling with isn't just a lack of pace. It's a lack of predictability, and that is exactly what Montoya zeroed in on when he described the car as fast, but only when it feels like cooperating. That isn't just a poetic description. In Formula 1, a narrow operating window is a technical warning sign, a signal that the machine behaves on a knife's edge, where tiny variations in temperature, setup balance, or even wind direction can turn a stable car into a twitchy one in a matter of laps. When a driver sits inside a car like that, they aren't thinking about attacking the lap or pushing the limits of aggression, they're thinking about survival. They're trying not to wake the instability, trying not to tip the car into that zone where it suddenly stops giving confidence. And that is the exact opposite of what Hamilton built his entire career on. His signature style relies on controlled aggression, on trusting the rear end, on leaning into the rotation of the car. Take away the confidence, and you take away the weapons that made him a 7-time world champion. This is why Montoya's analysis hits so hard. He wasn't just criticizing the SF25. He was describing the psychological trap it creates. Imagine going into a qualifying session not knowing which version of the car you'll get. One lap, you're planted. The next, you're catching snaps without warning. That unpredictability forces the driver to back out of instinctive behavior and switch into a defensive posture. And once a driver is defending rather than attacking, the ceiling on performance drops instantly. Charles has felt it. Hamilton has felt it. And both have been forced to drive with a level of caution that goes against everything a championship caliber car should demand. Now, the concerning part isn't that the car is flawed. Every team builds imperfect machinery at some point. The real issue is how Ferrari have responded internally. Engineers know the problem, they have data that proves the inconsistency. But when leadership sends mixed messages, the development direction loses clarity. Instead of a unified push towards solving the instability, different departments start interpreting the issue differently, and that confusion slows progress to a crawl. Hamilton saw the pattern immediately, and that's why he put together those detailed improvement documents Montoya mentioned. He wasn't complaining. He was mapping out a path forward, the exact same way he did at Mercedes when the team faced difficult seasons. But when those suggestions get interpreted emotionally rather than analytically, it becomes harder for the team to act decisively. And the problem with a narrow operating window is simple. The longer you wait to fix it, the harder it becomes to expand it. Even small improvements require direction, and direction requires unity. Before we shift into how this communication breakdown became a cultural problem inside Maranello, let me ask you something directly. Do you think the SF25's main issue is the car itself or the structure around it? Drop your answer in the comments because I really want to see how you read this situation. And while you're there, make sure you subscribe to help us reach our goal of 2,000 subscribers. Your support genuinely helps. This channel brings you the F1 coverage you want. Next, we're going deeper into Ferrari's internal culture because the way feedback is being interpreted inside the team may be the real source of the instability we're seeing on track. He's not just grumpy in the radio messages. Lewis has been acting like a leader inside Ferrari, and that's exactly why the way his actions have been read matters so much. He's stayed late with engineers. He's sent detailed improvement documents. He's dug into telemetry the way champions always do when they try to drag a team forward, and Montoya was clear about that. This isn't a matter of hunger or ability. It's a matter of interpretation. The problem is that parts of the organization treated his input as criticism aimed at people rather than as the kind of clear, experience-backed direction that should be treated like gold. When an experienced driver hands you a playbook, you either use it or you argue about who handed it over, and arguing wastes time you don't have in a tight championship fight. That's how a leader becomes a target, not because he wants to be, but because the system around him feels threatened by his very competence. So what are the consequences? For Hamilton, it means the simple things that let him perform: trust in the car's behavior, fast and honest feedback loops, and the freedom to push without politics get eroded. For the team, it means missed upgrades, slower development cycles, and a cultural tick where feedback is met with defensiveness instead of analysis. Montoya laid out two clear futures for Lewis at Maranello, one where Ferrari embraces his experience, streamlines communication, and turns him into the catalyst that drags a faltering program back to the front, and a darker one where the same tensions deepen, trust phrase, and a once promising chapter becomes what might have been. It's not hypothetical. You can see the signs already. Drivers who are treated as problems stop volunteering solutions and start protecting themselves, and that shift alone lowers the ceiling for what the team can achieve. Now, I want to put this question directly to you because your take matters. If you were sitting in the team principal's chair tomorrow, would you commit to building around Hamilton's experience, or would you start a longer rebuild? Drop your one-sentence answer in the comments. Build around him, or rebuild, and tell me why. And if you're finding this breakdown useful, please subscribe and help us get to 2,000 subscribers so we can keep bringing deep, inside analysis like this. Up next, we'll close the loop. Montoya's prescription for fixing the problem, concrete steps Ferrari can take, and a clear look at whether this situation is salvageable or not. Stay with me. Alright, friend, let's wrap this up with the part everyone always wants but teams rarely deliver: the solution. Montoya didn't just point fingers, he laid out a roadmap for Ferrari to actually fix this mess, and if they follow even half of it, Hamilton's future in red could look very different. First, Montoya said Ferrari needs to rebuild its communication model from the inside out. Not with new slogans, not with "we're working harder than ever" or talk. What he means is creating a structure where data flows fast, honestly, and without ego. Right now, Ferrari has layers, voices, approvals, political bottlenecks, and every layer turns simple feedback into a complicated discussion. Montoya's fix: strip it down, fewer intermediaries, more direct engineer-to-driver cycles. Let Hamilton talk straight to the people who actually change the car. No filters, no softening, no sugarcoating. Second, he said Ferrari must decide what kind of team it wants to be: a team that protects its internal feelings. or a team that protects lap time because you can't be both. Montoya argued that if Ferrari truly wants to fight Red Bull and Mercedes, they need to embrace uncomfortable truths like their organizational culture being too fragile to handle a strong leader. Hamilton isn't the issue, the system is. And unless the system toughens up, even the best driver in the world will look average in a red car. Third, and this was the most important point, Montoya said Ferrari needs to trust the champion they recruited. When you bring in someone with Hamilton's resume, you're bringing in leadership, not just speed. And trust goes two ways. If Ferrari shows Lewis that his experience isn't just welcomed but relied upon, everything changes. Development accelerates, the car becomes more consistent. The garage becomes calmer, and Lewis gives you the version of himself that wins championships, not the version stuck defending his every comment. But now I want your take on this, and make it quick. One sentence, do you think Ferrari will actually follow Montoya's roadmap, or is this another chapter in their long history of wasted potential? Drop your answer in the comments, and hey, if you've enjoyed this deep dive, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell. Your support is super important, and you can help us reach our goal of 2,000 subscribers so we can keep bringing these detailed breakdowns every day.